I encourage them not to wear the orange jumpsuit just because we don't need more people wearing jumpsuits. We just need more people to be aware of what's happening.
Hello, and welcome to Art Restart, where we learn from artists who, wherever they work, whatever they make, are shaking up the status quo in their fields and in their communities. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, the producer and editor of this podcast, which is brought to you by the Thomas S. Keenan Institute for the Arts at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. In this episode, we'll be speaking with multidisciplinary artist Sherrill Roland. Now imagine you're in your first year of graduate school, getting your MFA, when out of the blue you're arrested for a crime you didn't commit, then tried in a 2-day bench trial, sentenced to a year in prison, serving 10 months in prison, only to face years of legal limbo before being fully exonerated long after your release. That is what happened to Sherrill. He eventually did return to University of North Carolina at Greensboro to resume his MFA studies. And while there, he decided to turn the burden of his ordeal into a performance project. With the encouragement of then UNC faculty member, artist Sheryl Oring, you'll hear him reference her in the interview, he wore an orange prison uniform on campus every day for a year. The Jumpsuit Project soon expanded beyond the university to public spaces across the country, where he sat inside a 7 by 9 foot square of orange tape, an echo of a prison cell, and invited passersby to step inside and talk with him. In the years since, Sherrill has become one of the most prominent conceptual artists in the South, translating that raw act of endurance into a studio practice that explores the architecture of confinement, the language of data, and the humanity hidden within systems of control. His work is now in the collections of major museums, including the Studio Museum in Harlem and the North Carolina Museum of Art, and he has received several prominent awards, including a 2025 United States Artists Fellowship, supported generously by the Keenan Institute for the Arts. Sherrill spoke to me from his home in Durham, North Carolina. I started off by asking him to describe what the first day he put on the orange jumpsuit on campus was like, and if he could detail the first interactions he had with the public.
It took a while. My social media platform on Facebook had a Jumpsuit Project attached to this MFA, thesis project. And it went live the first day of school, but I couldn't wear the jumpsuit the first day of school because the university caught wind of this project because I explained it to them in my statement of purpose. So I wasn't hiding it from the university per se, but they caught wind of it and they red flagged my enrollment due to my, I said I had been incarcerated. And so they checked my application and they were like, but you didn't check that you've been convicted. And I was like, legally, I don't have to do that because I'm exonerated. And which is all in my statement of purpose. Hence the motivation of why I wanted to do the project is that I had been taken out of school, wrongfully incarcerated. Now I'm exonerated and want to do this work. And so they read it, but then they just triple check, are you lying? And I was like, no. And they were trying to see if I had,
just saw the word incarcerated and all the red flags went up.
Yeah. So
Right.
I had to, the university put me through additional third party background checks.
Oh my God, it must have felt like being back in court for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Me in conversation with an entity, not a person, There was not a person I could be angry with, or it felt like anybody was directly speaking with me. It felt like, this invisible, huge system. And so we asked the right questions. There is a registration deadline that needs to be met by every student. And since this third-party background check notification came after the first day of school, it limited my window, and the university had no control of the speed in which this third party could give them the information that my background check had cleared. If that information didn't come before my last day of registration, they would make no exception for me to get enrolled. So the first 2 weeks of school was just kind of waiting for this background check to do it again, the thing that I'm telling them, the truth, that nothing should come up. But it also brought up interesting questions about my past as like youth. They were like, well, this isn't really about the thing you're talking about. Like, if anything is on your record, they could use it against you as saying like you're lying or something like that. So it got really interesting. But nonetheless, my background check came like the day before the deadline and cleared. And so the next week, the third week of school, I finally put on the jumpsuit. And that morning, it took me a while to do it. It's one thing to say it,
Yeah.
it's another thing to do it. And so I've been saying it and it had been building. And then we went through this thing with the university and it kind of, put a little damper on the mood, team morale, and, but more so underlining motivation of why it was necessary for me to do this. So yeah, I put on the jumpsuit early in my studio. I drove to campus in regular clothes, went to my studio, changed into the jumpsuit, and walked out to the atrium of the building. And it was really early, like 9 a.m. or something. It's just one of those type of metaphorical or, game day things where like you can't sleep the night before, type of thing. So it's like I was up early and Sheryl, which wasn't planned, but she came and was like, she showed up for me and was like, I just couldn't also let you walk out here by yourself on the first day. So she showed up for me and she walked with me on the first day on campus, me wearing that orange jumpsuit to the library. And it was so eerie. It was like class was in session, so nobody was out there. So we're walking through a beautiful morning in Greensboro, North Carolina, just kind of like fall morning, slightly crisp, light, foggy type of feeling with the sun breaking through the trees, type like, very picturesque, empty, vacant campus because everybody's in class. And then as soon as we get to, the backside of the library, that's, huge pillars and columns, marble columns or whatever, past the statue of the Lady Spartan and, one person walks out of the library as we're walking up the steps. And then this gentleman just gives me, he's an older white gentleman, just gives me the weirdest up and down look. And he's really close to my body. So it's not like he really has to pass me shoulder by shoulder, even though there's nobody around us. Like, but because of the stare and I guess the shock of him seeing me in the suit, he's just walking straight towards me. And he just gives me the deepest up and down, profile look. And I'm looking at him, but he's not seeing me eye to eye. He's just seeing me from like feet to face, kind of like looking at what I'm dressed like. Uh-huh. And then I turn as I pass him and he's still turning as he passed me. And then he just like continues to look and then just walks off. And I was like, geez, like, that was really intense. Like, we really just like could have bumped shoulders. And I looked at Sheryl and I'm like, did you just see that? Like, that's like the first person we see. Like, it just got really intense. And then she was like, yeah, I saw that. And she's like, what else is funny? I was like, what? She was like, I know him and he knows me and he didn't even see me standing right next to you.
Wow.
And that was the beginning.
So you got just a tiny taste of what was going to hit you the more people saw you.
Yeah. And that was the first one. It was just like, oh, wow. Like, it was like, oh, this is about to be it. This is about to be quite the year,
In the Jumpsuit Project, was there a particularly memorable interaction with a member of the public that felt particularly insightful in some way about something you hadn't thought of?
Yeah. And, this project has been really profound to me and to my practice. And so I've had a lot of, visits from many different communities. But I think the one instance that always comes up to me when people ask me about one that I remember the most is a happening that never happened. I had the opportunity to do this project outside of the Los Angeles Contemporary Exhibition Space. It's LACE is the acronym. And they had a space that's on Hollywood Boulevard, I think, with the stars. Mm-hmm. And so I was outside of the facade and it was like a few-day performance. I would be out there for like a few days, but each day was like 6 hours or something like that. I would just stand out there in that orange duct tape perimeter and then just interact with people on the street. And the very first day, I got all kinds of, reactions and participants. And
It's
then
Hollywood Boulevard is its own
yeah,
thing.
yeah, I'm right up the street from the Chinese theater and Transformers and Spider-Man, and then I'm the guy in an orange jumpsuit. So this is like in an international type of street. Everybody's coming
Right.
from all over to see this. So language and perception, and even in the local context of Los Angeles, like orange jumpsuits aren't a thing. It's more blue and like all these other things that I learned in just like speaking with the public out there. But there, at the end of the first day, there was a lady who stopped by, and I, spoke to her because I saw her just standing outside of the space. And that really, it's like, hello, there's a sign and some information. Usually there's no information. It's just me. This, explain my project and why I'm out here. And she was kind of hesitant to kind of, speak about her experience of why she's interested in my project. And then I was like, if you can't stay today, I'm here tomorrow. Because if there's people around, sometimes, people just don't want to share too
Right.
much.
Of course.
And so I was like, you can come back tomorrow. I'm here tomorrow. And she was like, cool, yeah, I'll think about it. And I was like, all right. So the next day it came and it was early and nobody was out there. And I saw her pull up. And she came back. I was like, oh, wow, you came back. We chatted a little bit, but, I could tell she was in her mind of consideration of whether to speak. But, she had to step inside, the box to speak. And she was just hesitant, standing at the perimeter edge. And then she started to cry. And then she just walked away. And then she got in her car and drove off. That was like always something that I'm presenting an opportunity to kind of talk about this stuff. And however, she just passed and saw me on the street, and it ended up being what it was, maybe not what she thought, but even as an opportunity to kind of share whatever she was dealing with, she entertained it at least for 2 days, but it ended up being something so great that she just couldn't do it. And, it just reminded me that we all have these kind of edges or places that, sometimes are just too tough to kind of cross.
Yeah, not everyone is ready to step into the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd love to now talk about your studio practice, your visual art practice, because you work, well, it's pretty broad ranging work. I love that you deal with, there's a lot of puzzles in it. I'm a puzzles guy. So what I've appreciated, I saw your show at the Nasher. There's a puzzle aspect of it, which I appreciated. Numbers, the randomness, and yet identity through numbers and being hidden away through a pattern of data. But I'd love to talk about how you pivoted into the current work that you're doing and what you were looking to explore in this work and the work of recent years that you had yet to explore just through the Jumpsuit Project.
What was interesting is that I wasn't really trained as a sculptor, but after, doing this jumpsuit, a lot of it receiving from this project was everything related to my body. I had to always be conscious of my body, like how more approachable I was to the public if I was seated on a stool as opposed to standing, and like engagement about that. And then also like, where I was wearing this jumpsuit, I always was aware if I was in a coffee shop, if I was on the side of the road. A lot of it was bodily. And then when I started to speak about these instances to people in public sharing stories, I remembered my body in relation to the space. So when I thought about working out or writing a letter, I was more aware of like my body on what type of material I was sitting on that made it cold or frigid or felt tight or claustrophobic or this, that, and the fourth. So I ended up making sculpture. And the one thing I try to be conscious of, any sculptural object I end up making was a body or my body in relation to that material. So I ended up making doors with handwriting and thinking about my body and all this other stuff. And so when it comes back down to the most recent stuff about systems, I think a lot of my practice has been very parallel with my time and experience with this happening that was in the past. So in the beginning, everything was very close in proximity to my body. Even the sculptural work was like very close to where I slept, or either the mattress, or either the door I touched, or
Oh, you mean
whatever.
the actual objects that you were recreating, you had once lived in close physical contact with?
Yeah, and they began to, like, even the things that look like are center blockers are about me and my body touching the wall, and everything feels very much closer in proximity to the instance. So, like, very direct reference to my body and the happenings. And as we get to the present day, in like one of the most recent shows that you spoke about the puzzles, these are portraits of other people as well as like myself, but it hasn't anything to do with my body per se. They are body size. They're like to represent and fill in for people. So they're at least normally around 6 feet or 5 feet, in between those like kind of larger body S sizes, but they are in proximity to like the happening of my self and body. They're a little bit further away. And I think my practice is kind of showing that trajectory of like work that's very directly relative to like an orange jumpsuit and incarceration, so now being more abstract and more open, and being less or being just more indirect to those things, and having more opportunities for other conversations to kind of be in that pot with incarceration, if that makes any sense. So I'm getting further and further removed from kind of those real experiences that happened to me while I was incarcerated. And it's hard to dig deep back into those spots, because where I am now is not where I was when I had the anxiety of that sparked the jumpsuit in those spaces, if this makes any sense. So like, I think where I was at in life for the jumpsuit, that needed to happen, but I don't believe I can make something like the jumpsuit now. Because I don't have that type of, I have other sensitivities, but not like that. And so now I'm just exploring other, trying to open it up. And I've inherited a lot of other people's stories, and a larger community who share being exonerated. So the show you saw at the Nashville were all portraits of other North Carolinians who've been wrongfully incarcerated and since then been exonerated.
You mentioned this network of exonerated people that you've been in contact with. I imagine there's been a lot of commonality in the stories, but have there been stories that you've heard that really shed complete new light on what you experienced?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people like for the show at the National Museum at the Duke University. A lot of those gentlemen I have not met. Some I've had, and when I am able to speak with some of these folks, some of these individuals have spent most of my lifetime being wrongfully incarcerated. So I will begin to kind of share some of the things that happened to me. I think I got a lot of experience in a short amount of time. If you think short is, think a year and some change is short, but like
it's a lifetime for you.
Yeah, it's wild. And to hear how some of these are similar, like my happenings could just be the beginnings of somebody else's story, and it had gone on for so long. And so I'm always all ears when it comes to listening and awe, because I know how much even the time that I had changed me, and to know that somebody spent my lifetime in that same space and is able to kind of come out and use art.
Were there any other self-described artists in the prison with you?
Nah, I barely told people I was an artist. That didn't really, I mean, I rarely considered, I drew as best I could, but in that space, there was a lot of folks who did creative things, innovative, creative things, because we needed it. We were without a lot of things. So a lot of creativity came from people just makeshifting and, doing MacGyver-esque things with food or clothing or anything, just to kind of make it habitable. And through survival techniques that they would have never considered themselves to be Michelin star chefs or fine artists, I remember getting Art Forum subscription. A friend of the family, she was nice enough to set me up a subscription. And I remember getting Art Forum while I was incarcerated. And I remember showing Ai Weiwei's work of the sunflower seeds to people I was incarcerated with, and just thinking that like we could relate to this guy or this work. in his practice and stuff like that. So it's been kind of funny of like what that level of engagement with art was inside that space. Context matters. And so, I kind of realized that and kind of was able to ebb and flow with, what was important and what was of value in that space, if that makes sense.
Has any of your visual work ever been exhibited in a prison? Or are there plans to show it to some incarcerated people?
No, I don't think so. I've been a part of cohorts and exhibitions out here with formerly incarcerated artists that have been wonderful. I think with the DC performance that you mentioned before, I got in contact with the Georgetown Law School, and they were able to get me access back into the jail that I was incarcerated in, but not on the side that I was on. I was on a different side where folks have a little more privilege. But there was a guy that I was in on the other side that was now moved over to this side with privilege. And he was one of the folks who collaborates with Georgetown like a lot. He does public speaking while he was still incarcerated. And he ended up setting up this program. And so I presented my Jumpsuit Project in there. I couldn't wear the jumpsuit in there, but I presented the work to the men and women who were in there wearing orange. And that was really phenomenal to just, it was one of the shortest talks I ever had to do as far as explaining the work, because they knew exactly what I was talking about. It was like I didn't have to explain in so many details to a public who has never been kind of in that space. But going back to that space and speaking, it was an easy one-to-one. And they were literally they knew exactly what the jumpsuits were because they were wearing them. And they knew exactly the DC space that it came from because they were in it. And it was one of, they felt so aligned that they believed that they could do the same thing I was doing when they got out. They felt the same conviction and kind of purpose of like, I could totally do this also when I get it. And I was like, that's incredible that you feel the way I feel. Like that gives me affirmation, that I'm saying something, speaking not only for myself, but of others as well through this work. But I encourage them not to. I encourage them not to wear the orange jumpsuit just because we don't need more people wearing jumpsuits. We just need more people to be aware of what's happening.
Boy, it must have been tough for you to go back.
Yeah, it always is. My most recent visit to a jail was at Rikers. And I've been to juvenile centers and stuff like to talk and stuff. And every time going through these facilities, it's always, I have to take a back, and just kind of take a breath and, every place is different for sure. But I'm always reminded of like, on these particular instances, I now have the ability to leave when I want to.
Right. Yeah. You have proved yourself to be courageous time and time again. So what's the next project you're courageous enough to throw yourself into?
Yeah, that's, I don't know. I'm working for sure. I'm trying to see if some of the work currently that I've made can transition from being in art spaces, which is limited to a community for art goers, to possibly making work that is outdoor and be accessible to everybody, and really seeing if the work can make that transition for being just, only in gallery and museum spaces to being back outside again, like that jumpsuit, and being accessible to all and being for all. So I'm really excited about trying to step into that and step into any of those opportunities that may come.
And so what are those considerations? Is it just choice of material for outdoors or choice of topic or theme?
Yeah, all of that. I think I can get very complicated, at least in my last outing with the puzzles, It's not all there for face value. Like it can get very layered sometimes, which I was excited. I wanted to, in that work, I've been really conscious about trying to find something I'm obsessed about. And I wanted somebody to kind of go to the work or find themselves in the work like, oh my gosh, this guy had to be obsessed to make this work. And I found that with numbers. And I was like, this is my thing, Sudoku puzzles and numbers. And I'm having nightmares about numbers. I got so obsessed in that work and deep into that work. And so I was like, that's good. I'm glad I've found a new way to stretch in my practice, and I can return to that and go dig back deep into that. And now there's another place that I kind of want to go. And that's like, how can I still, find my voice or say the things the way that I can say it, but also be received to just anybody. And that's kind of hard because sometimes when you go to those who come to an art museum kind of has different expectations, but somebody who's just kind of riding through a neighborhood and passes by an object on their bicycle is kind of like, maybe you weren't trying to kind of do the mental gymnastics of, dissecting
Right.
this, whatever this is, So I want it to be accessible. I have a rule of thumb for my work. My mother has to be able to get it.
Oh,
She is like from the beginning, she is the first person I kind of go to with some of my dumb ideas. Dumb in the sense of like, I think I won't be able to pull it off. Like, this is crazy of me to think. And
right.
if I can break it down, if I can make it less complicated, or if I can make it legible to my mom, who's a hard one to win over when it comes to art, then I know like, I think it's going to be pretty good. I think I want it to be accessible. I don't want it to just be for the few. I want it to be in conversations with people, and by product, if it is in conversation with people, then it could be in conversations with their lives. People can live with it. People can take it, receive it, hold the responsibility of something that they've engaged with in the work, and they can take it other places.
If you'd like to learn more about Sheryl and read this interview, just head to uncsa.edu/artrestart. And if you'd like us to profile one of your favorite change-making artists, drop me a line. You can find me on Instagram at PierCarlo20. And of course, please hit the follow or subscribe button so you can be notified as soon as the next interview is published. Our theme music is by Shanghai Restoration Project. I'm Piercarlo Talenti, and on behalf of the Keenan Institute for the Arts, thank you for listening.